In today's lecture, we're going to be looking at Chapter 5 of the text concerning police management. So the duties of a manager in policing or in any other field are very similar. You have management, which is basically figuring out what resources you have and how best to implement them. You create a plan based on those resources, of what you want to do, how you want to do it. Then you take those resources that you have, organize them into effective and efficient manners that they can best serve to achieve the goal. You then have to take an active part in that management, not necessarily micromanaging, but leading by example, doing your own part, and hopefully everyone else will continue to do theirs. You also have to work to control the behavior of the individuals or the assets that you're working with, to keep everyone working towards achieving the goal, making sure that things are done in the proper manner. Again, whether we're talking about policing or whether we're talking about the operation of a restaurant. Very similar process, and if things aren't managed well, then chaos is likely to ensue. It's also important to know a clear chain of command, who reports to who is accountable to who. That way, you can have it can be easy to give new orders, to give new duties and responsibilities, and keep the process moving smoothly, as smoothly as possible. The evolution of police management. Originally, it was very militaristic style, basically looking at again, there was a lot of hiring from the military. These we're talking in the professional era of policing. So once we move beyond the political corruption of the political era, um, again, a militaristic model, giving people tasks, assuming that they are going to be goal driven enough to achieve those tasks. As we've developed and evolved our police systems, we've looked at addressing other aspects of policing, sort of what the effect on the job, on the individual, what effect the job creates in the individual. Also, trying to understand ways to address those effects. Um, we also have looked at the role that police play in the larger governmental operations, sort of systems theory idea that the different aspects of the public works affect one another. Not really just public works, but anything. So the social unrest that's happening in the United States right now, circa 2020, depending on when you're watching this video, um, a lot of different parts of the government of the country are impacting policing. To that point, you also have to have a contingency based model, because things are going to come up. That's one of the things about being a manager, and you'll see my last slide that I have on this PowerPoint. Things are going to come up. So you have to have an organization and individuals within that organization that are ready to address the problems when they do arise, because they will. It will happen. You don't think that your employees can do something stupider than they did last week, but they will. They will find a way. If you have ever been in that situation as an employee, you know that you have found things that have been stupid enough to do to infuriate your manager. I've done this. We've all done this. There's always going to be something, and because of the chain of command, it's always going to the saying that shit rolls downhill only goes so far. Eventually, at some point, the people above you have to be accountable for what happens. It's much like in Atlanta with the shooting that took place at the Wendy's, the police chief was forced to resign immediately after that. So again, it's not that the police chief was out engaging in the actions that resulted in the social unrest, but because her subordinates acted in a way that the mayor felt was improper, the police chief was fired. So the two types of organizational structure that we're looking at here are either centralized structure or decentralized. A centralized structure is more of the classical theory, where you have a bunch of individuals in different ranks. Decentralized, you're really moving a lot of the discretion and the line level decision making to those line level workers. The individual officers can make discretion about whether or not they want to instigate an arrest, or they want to issue a warning, or just talk to the person. Um, so a decentralized system is more of a community policing model, more of a ComStat based model, where you're having um, less daily supervision by the hierarchical tall structure, and more decision making at the individual level. So when we're looking at reviewing the process and what types of things we're going to hold officers accountable for, or hold them responsible for in a positive or negative connotation. First off is, what are the goals of the department? What is the department striving to do? How bad has the situation been before? If you've heard the term snafu before, it's a military term. It's a quasi unofficial military term. It stands for situation normal, all up. So you can fill in what the F stands for. So if that's your baseline, if your baseline is more or less a shit show, then you're going to have lower goals. If you're a department that is engaging the community well, has a positive reputation with the community, then you're going to set more lofty goals. You're going to set things that are going to sort of move everyone forward. But a lot of departments don't have that luxury. A lot of departments are in a situation where they have limited respect in the community, they have limited legitimacy in the community, and a lot of that is due to unreasonable goals being set, particularly with regards to the war on drugs. So when you say something like zero tolerance policing in New York City, a lot of community members are going to have a very negative response to that, because of the goals that were put in place for the police department during the 90s, early 2000s, when millions of people were hassled by the police in the attempt to try to remove all types of criminal offending, which is just not going to happen. So you have to look at what matters and to whom. Who are the police serving? Who are the police being held accountable to? Are they being held accountable to people in the upper class area of the city, where if they have 2 car break-ins in a month, they think it's a crime spree? Or are they being held to account for the people where murders are happening in the streets? That sort of Buckhead, Bankhead type of fallacy or question dichotomy that we have in Atlanta. Who are the police accountable to? Some of the things that we look at in measuring that performance: reductions in crime, apprehending offenders, reducing fear, which is a very important aspect, because if people are afraid to live in their community, then they're not going to be a part of it. If they are not fearful, if they want to be a part of their community, they're going to be more likely to give police information that they might need. They're going to be more likely to call the police when they see something they know improper happening. I'm not talking about calling the police because people are barbecuing in the park. I'm talking about calling the police because you see someone breaking into the house next to you, or you see someone breaking into a car near you, or you see a bunch of unruly youths on the street. Some neighborhoods, they don't have the social cohesion to say something about that. Ensuring civility, quality of services, making sure that they use force appropriately, making sure that they use their resources appropriately. And what resources do they have? Are we talking about, why does Dorville Police Department need a tank? They have one, but why do they need one? When was the last time the Dorville Police Department had to instigate a siege? It's very infrequent. So you also have to be aware of the message that sends. If the police are riding around in military vehicles, then it sends the message to the community that they're going to act in a militaristic way, which is not what we need in the vast majority of places in this country. There's also the issue of reviewing units, reviewing the sort of the small cohesive units that are in policing, and also individual officer review. So are you reviewing the precinct and the reduction in crime that's happening there? Are you looking at the individual officers, what kind of reports they're writing, what kind of arrests they're making? But also, how are you reviewing the managers themselves? Do you have a certain level of, this sergeant has this many good officers under them. They're benefiting the people in the community, or are we just looking at numbers? Are we doing what we would sort of call qualitative interviews with the officers to see how they feel about the managers that are overseeing them? There's a lot of ways that we can rank and score and review the performance. We need to tailor those within those goals and those who are we being held accountable to decide what really matters. You also have the issue of police subculture, and sometimes that can be in direct conflict with positive managing procedure. If you read all these things in the text, nobody follows all of these things. These are the same bullshit rules that gangs make up to try to hold the stupid young members of them accountable to a code that the OGs, that the high-ranking members don't actually follow. And it's the same thing here. If you have a police officer that is a corrupt cop and he's been that way for 15 years, he's going to fill new recruits' heads with the same dumb shit here that it's not applicable. It's not going to help anybody do their job. It's not going to help anybody form cohesive relationships with the community. It's basically just keeping their own status quo in place. Again, these things are not really followed. It acts as a shield for bad behavior, preying upon new officers, insulting the community, creating ill will towards the police. It's just not feasible. It's something that you would read, and when you read this whole chart, it's something that you would read in a fraternity movie about some boys' school in 1960. It has absolutely zero place in modern policing. It does no good to any police officer to live up to this fake code. But because of the socialization process, because of the subcultural process that takes place in policing, there are still elements of this that remain. And it oftentimes does officers more harm to adhere to these, again, false expectations. The role of police unions. The role of police unions is a developing one. For the most part, they do a good job at protecting the financial interests of their members by putting them in good contract situations, but the contract issue can come into direct conflict with the criminal prosecution and the workplace grievances brought by officers. So the function of a union is to protect its members, and they do that to the fullest extent of the law, which means that if a police officer is charged with an offense, the union basically has to back them. And again, that sort of contributes to the subculture issues that we talked about before, where we're not really building a lot of legitimacy in the community's minds about the police. So we probably need to do some sort of re-examining of the role of police unions in the operation of police forces, because at present, they're not doing a lot to move the conversation forward with bridging the gap between the police and the community. There's also the issues associated with the news media and police. So that's basically two fronts. On the one front, the police have to work with the media to have information about cases, try to get information from the community, to inform the community about potentially dangerous situations. On the other side, we've seen almost a antagonistic relationship between the police and the media with regards to police misconduct. And it's troubling that the police officers that are not involved in these situations feel the need to throw up that blue wall of silence and to try to prevent the media from obtaining things like body cam footage, or official reports or accounts of what happened, um, because the situation that we're in with the police right now, I look at is sort of like an infection. Maybe you've seen. I'm not condoning the viewing of the Dr. Pimple Popper stuff on YouTube, but that kind of thing. The only way that we're going to get better is there's going to be some pain. There's going to be some removing and abrasion of bad officers, and that's going to be painful for some of these organizations. But it's something that has to happen because the situation that we're in, the secrecy, the silence, it's not it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable when everyone has a camera, when the police officers themselves should have the body cameras. If a police officer argues they don't want to wear a body camera, they should be fired. No questions. If they don't want to wear a camera, then they're fired because what are you doing that you don't want to be on camera? Okay? Um, we are looking at a paradigm shift in policing and the way that we hire new police officers, um, the way that they view the role of the media has to change. It has to change to positively affect police subculture, to hold police accountable when they engage in wrongdoing, but I mean also to hold the community accountable if they bring false charges against the police or something like that. The main thing is you have to have transparency. Transparency with the process, transparency with what happened, transparency for why something happened. All of these things are essential to the reformation of the relationship between the police and the communities that they serve and the communities in which they work. Again, this is just my final note about management. Having worked in the past, not as a police manager, but as a pizza manager, and also worked at lower level positions within a restaurant and things like that, they're going to find some way to screw up. Now, whether that's putting the wrong toppings on a pizza, whether that's forgetting someone's drink and having to bring it back out there, or whether that's a bad police shooting. There are going to be things that come up, and where you are in your own position in the system is going to dictate what type of responsibility, what type of accountability you have to have for your subordinate officers, your subordinate employees. Because you can't just throw your hands up and say, well, we didn't know that was going to happen. As if you're going to be a manager in a police system or in any system, you have to you are accountable for the actions of the people that you are managing. So again, something important to note in policing and in any field, accountability is extremely important. Okay, so we're going to move on. The next section will be about the hiring and selection process for police operations.